Okay, great. It worked.
Yay!
One never knows. It's always, even, with really great and wonderful presentations to the State Redistricting Commission with experts, and, sometimes it all comes together at one time, and sometimes they have to struggle with their PowerPoint for a couple of minutes before it comes up for everybody. So I don't feel too bad if it takes a while. So as I said, we're going to talk about redistricting and why it's important and what you should know. And we're going to start with some of the basics. Political districts, the map of California with all kinds of things here. Political districts, they're called election districts or legislative districts or voting districts, and they're a smaller part of a city, a county, a region, or state. And they're created to make sure that people living within them can vote for candidates who represent them on a lawmaking body, whatever. A mosquito abatement district, city council, school board, county board, state, state senate and assembly, Congress, whatever it is. And generally only voters who live within a district can participate in the election. You can't vote in two districts. That's against the law. And the basic requirement is, as I think everybody knows, equal population. The US Constitution requires that the districts have the same number of residents, called population equality, or, one person, one vote. And the goal is to make sure that each member of our US Congress, in this case, represents the same number of people across the country. Now, the requirement isn't absolute population equality. There is some leeway allowed for good reasons, such as the Voting Rights Act compliance, but not that much. If you go over 8 to 10%, no matter what kind of district you're drawing, it will draw the court's attention, at least at the federal level. And it's also true for state and local districts. You do have to have population equality, or as close to it as is reasonably possible. You can't just have, 1,000 people in one district and 2,000 in another. Well, let's look at the requirements. So we've got the classic thing here. 4 districts with 5 people, and so each elected official represents the same number of people. And you do it because this makes sure that everybody's represented. And it's important to understand in this situation that these districts include all residents, not just voters, so that everyone is counted. But over time, people move, particularly they move here in California. Some regions grow in population and others see fewer people living there. Probably the best example I can think of for the greater Southern California area is we've got a growing number of people move from Los Angeles County to the Inland Empire because of rent and housing prices. They're just lower there. So because of this, the districts become uneven in numbers over the years, and they're just no longer equal. So in this case, as you can see, the districts on the right now have more people than the districts on the left. As they draw the lines, the black lines represent the new district boundaries. The lines have been redrawn to show equal population. So every 10 years, the federal government counts everybody in the country, the census. We were all really focused on the census this time. And as we've said, it's mandated by the Constitution to determine equal numbers across the country. And it provides the data that affect our communities for the next decade and provides a snapshot of our nation. And after the census finishes, district boundaries have to be redrawn to even out the size of each district. This is called redistricting, and it happens at all levels of government. In California, district boundaries are redrawn for representatives in Congress, the state assembly and Senate, and literally hundreds of county boards, city councils, school boards, and special districts. And the process of drawing new maps is based on the census data. And in this data situation, the blue dotted lines represent the old district boundaries, and superimposed now the black lines, you're back to a situation where each district now contains the same number of people. So there you go. So why does it matter and why should we care about this? Well, it's all about political power. Redrawing the boundaries can affect the balance of power in Congress and the state legislature. It also affects power between political parties, geographic regions, ethnic groups, and special interests. Redistricting can also affect whether elections are kind of competitive and have more than one or two candidates for voters to consider. Now, we need to be clear that the League of Women Voters does not support competitiveness as a requirement for drawing districts. But when you do draw districts fairly, sometimes you get more competitiveness with more candidates. In the case of drawing it fairly, you make sure that the incumbent doesn't draw districts that allows him or her to stay in office. And people will have a more incentive to run. You also need to remember that competitiveness is not one of the rules of redistricting in California. So people talk about it constantly, but it's not one of the criteria that's used when drawing district boundaries at any level in California. So the political power. In this example, the district with the green boundaries is 2/3 Whig and 1/3 Tory. This would be considered a safe district, meaning there's no competition and very unlikely that a Tory could win. However, if we change the way the district is drawn to be more equal, the district becomes 1/2 of each. And it'd be called a toss-up district or a swing district, we call it in California, meaning the elections in the district would be more of a contest between the two candidates. And whoever won would need to pay attention to all her constituents, not just the ones who agreed with her particular agenda. It's really important because it's been proving increasingly in California where you've got swing districts, the office holder who pays attention to their constituents has a better chance of getting reelected. The key thing you all have to remember is that the impact of redistricting lasts for 10 years. Because of this, the impact is profound, more than any single election or event. The people who draw the lines, control how the power goes in the state and the county and the city for the next 10 years. So whose voices are heard? We all know different parts of the population have differing political views, and they're linked to a political party association, but also to social and economic characteristics as well as geography. The best example would be individuals with racial and ethnic differences often have viewpoints on what candidates will best represent them that are different from other populations. So the way you draw the district maps impacts whether voters with these differences in viewpoints have the voting power to elect candidates of their choice, or at least influence the outcome of elections in their districts. So in this particular example, a racial group makes up 1/4 of the area's population. If you draw the lines the way you see them here, there are 4 districts, and the racial or ethnic communities make up only 1/4 of nearly each district. We call this cracking, and it refers to fragmenting concentrations of minority populations throughout multiple districts to ensure they have no effective voice in any one district. If a community could be 60% of one district, but instead is split so it's 20% of 4 districts, cracking has occurred. Chances are the communities won't have a say in elections in any of these districts. And there's also really strong possibility that none of the elected representatives from these districts will hear the needs and viewpoints of communities of color because they don't have to rely on the communities to be reelected. And so why on earth would they bother to pay attention to them? The best example I can think of in the greater Southern California area is the 2001 redistricting, which the last one done by the state legislature, where Koreatown was split into 6 districts. Well, of course, that resulted in absolutely no one area of the population being able to speak with a united voice to even like 3 elected representatives. However, it could be different if you draw the lines another way. Here, the communities of color make up over 3/4 of the population in that top middle district. And of course, they're going to have significant influence on the elections in the district. They're also in a much stronger position to advocate with their elected representatives to meet their needs. In contrast to the districts shown in the last slide, where the racial and ethnic groups had little influence in any of the 4 districts. So this is a different way to go about things. In this example, the minority population is packed into a single district, which again diminishes their ability to have a full representative voice. And packing refers to concentrating as many people from a minority group as possible into as few districts as possible. Therefore, you limit the total number of districts in which they have influence. For example, if a community could be 55% of 2 different districts, but are concentrated together so that they're 80% of just one district and 15% of another, packing has occurred. So I guess one of the best examples I can think of this was in North Carolina, a congressional district. A couple of cycles ago, there were 2 districts in congressional districts in North Carolina who were electing Black candidates. One of those districts was not a majority Black population. They were about 45 or 46%. But the Black candidates attracted a fairly significant number of white voters and therefore elected the Black candidate. Well, the legislature wasn't going to have that the next time. So in the next round, they packed the African American voters, I don't know, 80% into one district. And therefore, the other district no longer had enough African American voters to make a difference. And they claimed they were doing it because they had to uphold the Voting Rights Act. Well, the League in North Carolina and the National League sued. And it went to the U.S. Supreme Court, and the court struck down those maps. They said there had been packing, and they were forced to redraw the lines, and they got back to the situation where they were the time before. Of course, this is dramatically oversimplifying, and there are other legal rules that apply on how to draw district maps, and we're going to look at them. But the most important one to think about is the Federal Voting Rights Act, which may provide protection for racial and ethnic and language minorities in these situations, and ensures that at the very least, they will get decent representation. So it matters who draws the lines. In this example, you see, take a look at this. When elected officials draw the lines, they tend to draw lines that allow them or their designated successors to be reelected. Yeah, it's just human nature. It's not to criticize. It's just people want to get reelected. And if they're not going to run anymore for whatever reason, then they want, the person that they think best represents their interests to get reelected, to get elected after them. And so they draw districts which privilege their chances of getting reelected. And so that's why the league and we more and more other groups say that we don't want elected officials to draw the lines because it's self-interest and, we need to challenge that. So let's look at the state redistricting process. I think a lot of you do know this already, but in 2008, California voters passed Proposition 11. Before Proposition 11, the California legislature, our state senators and assembly members, were in charge of redistricting for Congress and the legislature and the Board of Equalization. The process was controlled by the state, Senate, and assembly leaders, and it tended to either gerrymander in favor of one party or protect incumbent office holders, whatever their party. There were few rules beyond making sure that there were equal populations in each district and a minimum pass at the Voting Rights Act. So politicians chose the voters they wanted. They drew maps around areas of voters they thought would reelect them. As I mentioned, 2001 was the last legislative redistricting, and in a fine bipartisan show, they just protected whoever was in office. Even though the Democrats were in the majority, they looked after all the incumbent Republicans. And so there were a tremendous number of safe seats drawn, which did not actually represent what the population looked like in 2001. So starting in 2010, after Props 11 and 20 were passed, all redistricting that was controlled by the legislature in the past was moved to the new Citizens Redistricting Commission. It's made up of 14 California voters. The process includes many public hearings, asking for input via email, this time a new online application, letters, public testimony, and based on what they hear, they draw district maps, first drafts. This is followed by more hearings, more feedback from the public, modification, and then the final maps are drawn. And they do all their work, including drawing the lines, in public. And you can watch all their hearings online and provide feedback. The first Citizens Redistricting Commission was successful in drawing 4 sets of maps. The results were district maps that better represented a wider range of California communities. They weren't perfect, but they were dramatically better than when the legislature was in charge. So the 2020 Commission, the second one, has been chosen, and it began its work like September of last year. So how do we work through this process? Release of census information and data triggers the redistricting process. And I'll talk about the latest delays in a minute. In California, there's one extra step added this time in terms of data, because we now allow people in state prison to be included in the communities from where they come. So they're counted their home address rather than the area with the prison. And this is also true at the local level for people who are in county jails. Up until recently, if you were in Los Angeles County Jail, you were a resident of Los Angeles County. But they did start to move prisoners around when they were redoing things. So if there happens to be a prisoner for whatever reason in Los Angeles County Jail who really came from San Diego, then that person would be counted as being from San Diego. And this is going to be an enormous shift in power, because the areas where they had prisons are rural, and now the population data runs with the areas where the prisoners came from. So it's going to be very interesting to see what happens. So for this upcoming cycle, we're not sure what the heck is going to happen. The latest announcement is that the census data, the data that the committees use to draw the lines, will be released to California the end of August, say August 26, 27. It takes a month for the statewide database to get all that material, compile it, slice it and dice it into packages, because you send one package to the state, which needs all kinds of things, the other package to the Ventura County, to wherever it is, hundreds of boards. And so they have to put that all together and get it out there. So that means that the data will not reach any redistricting entity in California until the 1st of October. Now, right now, there had already been one delay, and so the state Supreme Court gave the state commission until December 15th, 2021 to draw the maps, and the state legislature passed a law to allow local governments extra time to do their redistricting. Well, given the date now, everything is in chaos. There is all kinds of discussion, and they're going to have to deal with the fact that they can't make the December 15th deadline for maps if you follow the process. And so what do we do? Do we delay the 2022 primary? It's just, and they're working on it. But right now, that's all I can tell you, and that's all anybody knows. However, we don't have to wait until the commissions get the census data to start public input. And that can start before it's available by having people talk about their communities of interest, their neighborhoods, to the various commissions. And members of the state commission have already decided that they are not going to wait. They're setting up a process whereby they will take comment from the public about communities of interest in neighborhoods in a number of different ways. And the league and our partners are strongly pushing local redistricting groups to do the same thing. Don't sit and wait. Get as much information from the public as you can before the census data arrives. And so the state commission is required to draft the maps, hold the hearings about them, and there are a lot of rules about public notice and time for feedback. And based on 10 years ago, once they get the first draft out there is then people start to really pay attention and get really, really excited and upset. So the statewide database holds all the redistricting data from California. It's housed at UC Berkeley, and it makes the information available to the public. It is unique in the country. The state of California, and the legislature did this about 20 years ago. They set up this database, state-funded database, which holds all demographic information for the state of California. Anything you might want to know about the state of California in terms of democracy. And it's available to the public. Anyone can, request information about whatever. It's used by academics, by businesses, interested people. No other state has it. And right now, there is a nonprofit consortium seeking to do the same thing for the rest of the country. It won't be done by the states because most of the states don't want to share that data. But they're trying to the extent possible to copy California. So they're working with the state legislature and they've created, the legislature commissioned and funded a new computer app, which would run either on your computer or your smartphone. You would download it, and if you wanted to give the commission testimony about your neighborhood or your community of interest, you download it, you pick the language you want to have it in. When it's fully operational, it will offer 12 language choices. Then you answer a series of questions. You draw a little map of your neighborhood or community of interest. You say, what are the boundaries? This street, that park, this freeway, whatever. And then you say why you have a community of interest. I'll just take something in Los Angeles. Pico Union District is and has been for some time heavily immigrant. And it's not one group, it's lots of different groups. And so you would say, well, Pico Union, and you would draw, tell where the boundaries are. And this is what they did 10 years ago. They said, what we have in common is that we are new to this country and we need to have representatives who understand our needs. So don't draw districts on the basis of the fact that we speak different languages or of different ethnic or racial groups. What we have in common is our immigration status. And the commission was able to do that. So whatever you say, you put it in there, and then so it allows anyone not just with an access to a computer, but if you have got a smartphone with even a limited data plan, you can submit your testimony to the commission. You send it in. It's put into the databases and with all the other submissions, and so you don't even have to give public testimony. If some people don't want to get to speak in public. In this case, at this time around, it'll obviously have to be virtual, but people just aren't comfortable. So if you don't want to do that, you could submit your community of interest testimony that way. Or you could do the old-fashioned way, and we're teaching people how to do this. You print out or draw a paper map, and you get colored markers, and you outline your neighborhood or community of interest, and then on a piece of paper you say, this is who we are, these are the boundaries, this is why we're a neighborhood, and you can mail it in. Or you can, as I say, when it's time for the public hearings, you can testify to that. So it's going to be a very simple app, and we're tremendously proud of it. I think you have to give the legislature credit. It's going to be a huge step forward for people to be able to participate. So what are the rules for the state? Obviously, equal population, respect for the Voting Rights Act, has to be contiguous. You can't have the 34th Assembly District in, one part of the state and the other half in the other. You have to maintain, to the extent possible, boundary lines of cities and counties and preserve communities of interest. And really that preserve communities of interest in the law, because the league fought very hard for it, is right up there on the same line with respect city and county boundaries. Because depending upon where you are in California, the community of interest is more important. And, in any large urban area, it's absolutely impossible to draw districts that stay within city lines or county lines. It just can't be done. And even in the rural areas, they may, up far north, they may have to draw a district that takes in a number of counties. So that's, and it has to be geographically compact in that you can't draw a district that stretches way up along one line and leaves out a population that's right next to it. So the key point is this: the California Commission balances all these things. They take the testimony. They make sure that it's substantially equal population. They do the best job they can on using the Voting Rights Act. The league always lobbies for them to use the Voting Rights Act as a floor, not a ceiling. Don't just do the least you can get away with. Proactively use that to empower communities. And and from what we can hear, the commission is already totally committed to that type of thing. So what are communities of interest? The California Constitution defines it. A community of interest is a contiguous population which shares common social and economic issues that should be included within a single district for purposes of effective and fair representation. Having said that, it's just residents who live nearby one another and share interests. Could be economic, social, cultural. It could be housing, or in some areas, school attendance boundaries, homeowner associations, a mosque, a church, a bus transportation line, shared political boundaries from other districts. It could be an environmental community of interest around say a pollution issue. It's up to each individual community of interest to give their testimony to the commission, explain who they are and what they want, and then the commission balances all that to create district maps. So how do we do it? We help people. Well, the COI app is up on the commission website. It's already in use. It got a very soft launch, and they got over 30 maps People just heard about it and went in and put their community of interest in. I would urge everybody to go look at it and play with it. It's great fun. And we're going to give instructions as to how, if you're reaching out, you can teach people how to use it. Again, you get paper map kits, written or oral testimony, but it's the important thing is that we get people to understand that they need to tell the commission who they are, where they are, and why they should stay together for representation, because that's what it's all based on. Okay, so moving on to the local, which is new this year. So redistricting has many levels. Every local government entity that has single-member districts must redraw those lines every 10 years. And redistricting at the local level is really important. It's at the local level where, you can have the greatest impact on government and influence policy that's going to affect our lives. So we really need to pay attention to these redistricting processes. So local redistricting means maps for all these governments. You've got supervisors, councils, school boards, community college boards, and all those special districts, including mosquito abatement districts. There are mosquito abatement, hospital assessment, everything, fire fighting assessment, hundreds of them in California. And until recently, most of the maps were drawn by the elected officials who drew their own lines, and many still are going to do that, with very few rules beyond the California, the Brown Act, the Sunshine Law that requires local governments be conducted at open and public meetings. And they had to do minimal enforcement of the Voting Rights Act if necessary. Now, a few local governments have independent redistricting commissions, and a few have appointed commissions with varying powers, but most local districts in the state, the officials are drawing their own maps. There are, however, new laws. Now you've got to have ranked criteria, no matter who's drawing them. In addition to, I will say I'll just pick it. The Los Angeles City Commission, which is advisory, and the council can ignore what they do. You've got to, aside from population equality, including the incarcerated, Federal Voting Rights Act, got to be contiguous, got to respect communities of interest. You got to use natural and artificial boundaries, got to be compact, and no favoring or discriminating against a political party. Now, we all know that the local offices in the state are nonpartisan, but we also know the party affiliation of everybody running. So if a elected body is drawing the lines and they, whatever they did in the past in terms of drawing lines, so such as to make sure that the nonpartisan folks elected were of their party, they can't do that anymore, which is an advance. They also have new public outreach requirements and hearing requirements. At least 4 public hearings have to be held. Now, I say at least, and I'll get to why I say at least in a minute. And accessibility in all its aspects must be respected. Our local redistricting toolkit includes the details of all the rules. But the important thing for you to remember is that these requirements are the floor, not the ceiling. Many local jurisdictions are presenting the 4 hearings as the required number. Well, the law says 4 hearings, so we're going to do 4 hearings. Not so. That's the minimum. And as I said earlier, we are pushing all commissions at every level, who's ever drawing the lines, to hold as many public hearings as necessary. So they've got to do outreach and they've got to give notice. For instance, they're required to give minimum notice. And we have been pushing around the state for more than the minimum There's all kinds of things that you can do. They have to do the minimum. However, special districts, particularly education, K-12 and community college, they still have very few rules other than the Brown Act and respect for the VRA. It's entirely dictated by the incumbents. So it's up to us, the league and the public, to hold their feet to the fire and do the right thing. Our toolkit is a good place to start. You can link to the best practices guide from Asians Advancing Justice and start from there. So here's some tips. If you've decided that, well, if you live in districts where they have at large, there are no single member districts, then that's not going to be for you. But if you live in districts where you got a council or school board or something that you are really concerned about, then you might want to focus on that. And if you're going to do Riverside, they have a new unit in Southwest Riverside County, and they're focusing on 3 small cities in their area who have a history of bad behavior when it comes to redistricting. So they're going to be monitoring them. So visit the websites to find out when their redistricting starts. And if there isn't any information up yet, ask, when are you starting the process? So start contacting the elected officials and talk about best practices. Start finding partners. Publicize the best practices, attend the meetings, ask for commitment to best practices, and call them out if they don't. That's what a number of leagues are doing. So again, special districts, water, park, transportation, whatever. Same rules apply, lack of rules. And depending upon where you live in California, these special districts can be more or less important. In certain areas in the Central Valley, in rural areas, water districts, which are small and don't have a lot of money. There's a huge concern about the quality of the water that people are drinking and the rates they're paying for it. And so who gets elected to those water boards is absolutely crucial. And so there are league and groups, not just the league, but other community groups that are focusing on things like water boards or park boards. Further north, there's a special park district, which people are focusing on because in the past, they tended to allocate money to keep the parks in certain areas repaired but not in others. Or when they were proposing new parks, again, the parks were proposed in some areas, but not others. There's a real focus in that area on the park board and watching how they draw the lines and focusing on better and fairer representation. So it really is, research. So where are we in all this? What are we going to do? The big picture. We, at every level of league in California, are advocating for transparency. We want a transparent process. We want full public participation at every level, which emphasizes communities or groups which haven't been heard or represented well in the past. We want maps that are fair and reflect public input, as much as possible that keep communities together in districts. Again, with a priority on communities who have been underrepresented. And again, it happens at all levels. And because of the way the census has come out, it's all happening this time in late summer, fall, and winter 2021. And it's already a 3-ring circus. And so leagues are deciding what it is they want to concentrate on. But it's all going to happen at once. It's going to be challenging, shall we say. So what's our role? The State League is going to focus on the process and supporting local leagues to assist with local redistricting activities. The State League is not going to be commenting on or submitting maps. Local league could comment on a map or submit a map to their area if you choose. But all of us at every level will be working on public education, encouraging involvement and facilitating public input. And when you're doing this, just a reminder, each league has to be clear about who's speaking for the league in its area. There should be a single official league voice. and lots of encouragement to everyone to give input as individuals. But when I say single league voice, each league decides, you know, at any given time, the president may give testimony at a meeting, but if the president is sick or something happens, another board member could be designated to give the testimony. That happens all the time. But everybody has to agree that on what the statement is and who is officially designated to make that statement. Everybody else can certainly give comments as individuals, but it has to be clear who, you know, that there is one league voice. And if you're in a district with other leagues, you need to talk to them as well before you, out. So, planning for success, find allies. Use the local census outreach network. Lots of leagues are doing that. They were totally engaged in it. The network still exists, so they're just continuing to connect. You know, or other networks or community coalitions. The league, National State League, is working with a very broad and diverse coalition of partners, 22 partners statewide so far. And if you want help in finding partners in your community, contact us. And local leagues have already started to do this. We've had local leagues saying, we're working on this, and who are your partners in this area? Could you introduce them to us? And we've been able to do that. And our partners are very, very willing and anxious to be working with the league. So, you know, wherever they are, people will be wanting to work together. Be creative. Try new ideas. There's a toolkit there. It's a great place to start. You know, not everything you do will be successful, but work with your partners and, you know, get the word out. And I'll tell you what I mean by creative. If you're trying to get the word out about public engagement, we all now more and more think about the internet and social media. But there are large sections of the state that internet connectivity is a good theory, but doesn't always exist in reality. And what other means of communication are out there? A really great example is the fact that 2 of the commissioners on the state commission heard about the application process for the state commission on their radio. They have little or no internet ability, and so they were, both of them, were literally working in their garages, heard the news on the local radio about the commission application process was open, and here's where you get more information, and they applied, and they're on the commission. So radio, blogs, whatever avenue that is important in your area. I know you've got a number of local newspapers who will print your letters. I heard all about your letters. So that would be one really great place to start talking about redistricting and community involvement. Just and press outreach. You know, reach out to the media, where people in your communities get their info. Just outreach, outreach, outreach. Every absolute avenue you can think of to get the word out so that people know what's going on and begin to think about why they ought to be engaged. And advocate. What are you going to do so that redistricting succeeds? You can advocate for specific neighborhoods or communities of interest, best practices, ensure voices of groups who have been underserved that are now heard, and think creatively about the level where you want to engage. What issues matter most in which communities? Where are decisions made about the issues? Does the city council or board of supervisors ignore parts of your community? There are a few leagues, county leagues and counties that are focusing on their boards of supervisors because the supervisors draw districts which, you know, just effectively cut out large chunks of the county. They just don't have a voice. Or is the school board lacking voices a part of the community? Is it the same old, same old? And if this is the case, then, you know, as some of the leagues are doing, choosing to focus on a school board or whatever, because that's where they think it's important and they can make the most impact. So now our dog is raising his paw, and it is time to answer questions. Have people been monitoring the chat? And let me get out of this. I will stop the share. There we go. So, questions?
Thank you, Chris. Yeah, the chat has to do with remembering to record this and muting if you're not speaking. So feel free to unmute yourself and ask a question if you want to. I would recommend that you just raise your hand so that we don't all ask at the same time. So would anybody like to present a question for Chris at this point? Pat Patasic.
Okay, you said that we could contact the state league about who our partners are. I'm not quite clear who our partners are, say, for instance, in this county might be. How would the state, who are these partners? I guess I'm not so clear about that.
Well, I guess the way you could do it would be to say, we want to work on redistricting in Ventura County.
Mhm.
Who among your partner, who among there have groups in Ventura County? We'd like to get their contact information and reach out to them and talk about how we work together.
Okay, so for instance, we have an organization called Cause in this county. And they are doing a lot to advocate for themselves and for the people they represent. Could they be our partners, even though
Sure.
they have definite political?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yes. Okay. I was thinking about also CFROG. I don't remember what it stands, the exact letters stand for, but they are fighting against placement of oil and gas wells throughout the county, especially the unincorporated areas.
Yeah, I mean, the League of Conservation Voters is one of our statewide partners. They may have, you know, because they coordinate with all the local groups. So, you know, that there's a very big interest now for environmental issues, environmental justice, all that kind of thing. So, yeah, there's.
So if we contact the state, we could find out who
Yeah.
they
Mm-hmm.
have already. Okay.
Yeah. And I mean, it's not just the statewide partners. I mean, as you say, Cause is not officially a member, but I mean, I know Santa Barbara worked with them. So, I mean, and you've worked with them in the past. So, yeah, they would be a partner.
Okay. Just curious how that works.
Anybody else? Maddie.
Yeah, so you were talking about the toolkit and the great app for requesting or notifying people of your community of interest. I didn't see any links or addresses in your presentation.
No, because things change. What I will do is send Betsy the links.
Okay.
And then you can do it because sure as I get them in there, then see the State Commission is moved to a new spiffier modern website. And they're still moving stuff over from the old clunky one. So there I would have to find the links. And then we are also, the State League is also spiffing up our redistricting landing page. And, you know, staff is moving stuff from one place to another. So I just go, it's just be easiest to find the links and send them to Betsy.
Okay.
I have a question. Just a point of clarification. Communities of interest don't necessarily mean this is what I think the whole district should be. It's more that this is a neighborhood that should stay together within a district. For example, we in Ojai tend to be agricultural people in the east end of Ojai, and for a long time we were part of the Bakersfield district, but we, in the last redistricting in 2010, got to be included in the Ojai Valley and Ventura County rather than Bakersfield. So advocating for a particular neighborhood or community that shares an interest doesn't mean you're drawing the lines of the district. You're just drawing the lines of this is an area
Right.
that should be included in one
Right.
district, divided up.
Now, there are some communities of interest which are really big, and so they might be a district. But you don't have to, you're not, this tool, you're not drawing a district map. You're drawing your neighborhood, your community of interest. And it's interesting you brought that up about you got lopped into Bakersfield and now you're back in Ventura. Part of that app is to say, you know, if you're too small to be a district, which communities would you next to you would you want to be together in?
Ah.
And which communities would you not want to be together with? So in your case, I guess you could put, well, I don't want to be put back in Bakersfield. I'm serious.
Mhm.
It's not a joke. You would say that. You would say, I've absolutely, you know, this is what happened, and we want to stay for all these reasons. We want to stay in Ventura County.
I have one other question here. And throughout Ventura County, there are a lot of the cities that have gone to districting. Fillmore apparently is one of the cities that was able to avoid the lawsuit that this guy is going around all over the state threatening. And I'm not sure why, but maybe it's because they're kind of a homogeneous population
That would be it. Yeah.
mainly. Anyway, but they were able to stay at large, whereas most of the other cities and communities in Ventura County have gone to districts, which is kind of crazy because the city of Ojai is 4 square miles and it has 5 city council districts in it
And 5 school districts.
and 5 school districts. But the school districts at least include the unincorporated areas. The city itself is just that 4 square mile area.
Yeah.
So my last question though has to do with, okay, so we set up these districts based on communities of interest and population and you know, all the other criteria that they use. Is there any kind of a metric that will be used to show that, yeah, this made a difference? This showed that this group of people had better representation over that 10-year period.
Yeah. Well, the metric is, and I mean, you know, the political scientists have done the metrics for the state districts over time. But what you do is basically you look at over the 10-year period, who got elected, what kind of candidates, who ran, what kinds of candidates ran, and what kinds of candidates got elected. A past metric would be the first time they had to redistrict the whole state after the Supreme Court decision, which said that you had to, all of the legislature had to be by population, was 1970. And the legislature and the governor deadlocked, and it went to the state Supreme Court. The state Supreme Court drew districts which were good, you know, they followed the rules. And a fairly large number, increasing number of African American candidates got elected. In 1981, they did, the Democrats controlled both the state house and the legislature, and they did a gerrymander. In 1990, you had the same situation as 1970. They deadlocked, it went to the state Supreme Court. The state Supreme Court appointed special masters to draw the districts. They drew really good districts, and more women and Latino candidates got elected. Now, 2001, they just protected who was ever there. 2010, the metric would be, one of the metrics was how many incumbents didn't win. And what happened was for Congress, a number of long-seated Congress members, both Republicans and Democrats, looked at their new districts and said, I'm going to retire
Hmm.
because, because the demographics had changed. A few decided to run anyway and lost. Different kinds of candidates got elected because the districts were better representative of racial or ethnic or linguistic lines. In the rural communities, they drew things based on water usage and everything. And there were more what we call swing districts. There were districts which could go either way. And in one election, one party won. The next election, the other party won. This last time around, I guess it was 2018, Congress in Orange County, they flipped a few districts because the Republican incumbents just didn't pay attention to what their constituents, the Republican constituents, were telling them they wanted and didn't want, and they lost. And so when I was saying earlier, you got to pay attention if you're in a swing district, because you get elected one time, and if you don't listen, you're not responsive, you just ignore what the voters want, you could lose. So they'll do it this time. The metrics will be basically at every level, like what was it like before? How many candidates of this sort, and then how many over the 10-year period, what kind of changes took place, if any?
Okay. Judy, unmute yourself.
Thank you. Chris, there have been a lot of deficiencies in the 2020 census. Do you know of any attempts to rectify the problems?
Yeah, well, yes. I mean, that's that's why it's taken so long, is
Right.
because they kept uncovering more and more, and they kept pushing the date back, and everybody was stunned when it was supposed to be, the end of May, and then they dropped the bomb on everybody and said, well, no, now it's the end of August. And they had to deal with things like, not saying we're just going to, differentiate between citizens and non-citizens, but there were just a whole lot of things, and so they made a good faith effort to rectify as many mistakes as possible. Now, I've got to wait and hear what Karen McDonald and the group at the statewide database say. They can add some things in, but the delay is horrendous, but better that than something really badly flawed, because that opens up a whole opportunity for lawsuits. The maps aren't right because the data is just fatally flawed, and they'll probably do it anyway, but that's why the delay is an attempt to correct as much as possible. Yeah.
Pat.
Well, I just see this job of redistricting as being so incredibly difficult because there's so many conflicting interests, and people claiming that they should be together because of this, and some other group claiming they should be this way because of that. And how do they? So you gave us that list. The first one is they have to be equal number or close to it. And then, so it's that list in order then.
Yeah, in order.
So that's how they might come up with a district that isn't going to please a number of people.
Exactly. I mean, and like our partners say, all of our partners say, the line drawers, it's a no-win situation. No matter what you do, you're going to get grief.
Right. Yeah.
But all you have to do in terms of the law is to demonstrate. So you have to clearly say, we drew this district this way for these reasons. And the courts don't require that. You can't give a perfect platonic district, but what you do have to demonstrate is that you balanced it all in rank order, and you made the best good faith effort possible to create these districts. And people think that it's, here's my community of interest, or here's my district, and it's perfect. Well, it is, but then it bumps up against somebody else's district, and it ripples throughout the state. So yeah, it's it's a really hard job, and, hats off to the people who volunteered to do it.
Mhm.
I mean, at the local level, um, particularly the independent commissions, it's really hard, and they're on a steep learning curve, but you can tell listening to them that they're determined to try really hard.
Yeah. Along that line, the size of the group.
You kind of,
So if you have a really large one and there's a small group with a different interest that they are, do they take that number in consideration? How
oh yeah,
big the
I mean,
lobby
yeah,
is
how
sort
big
of
the, well,
for
not
one or
the
the other?
lobby, but it's like, it's more a case of
Like-
this is the population size of the well, a community of interest could be a small neighborhood or it could be a larger area. And depending upon, if it's at the state level, they're going to be thinking about larger groups, the large communities of interest, and then where do they fit in the smaller ones who are kind of like them, and, sort of thing. At the county and city level, of course, then it gets smaller. But, my favorite example from 10 years ago and some other things is horse owners associations. Horse owners associations are very vocal. And the Horse Owners Association in Oakland just went on at length with the state commission about how they were kept together, but didn't seem to realize that there was a really large minority population within the greater Oakland area with needs and wants. Well, of course, the commission thanked the Horse Owners Association and dealt with the larger community. The same thing was true in Los Angeles. The Atwater Village Horse Owners Association and the Rancho Park Horse, they were out there, they want to be kept together, and not looking at the surrounding area, which was in both cases, a minority language group who they were happy to be, I mean, they didn't care. The horses are fine, but the commission had to pay more attention to the surrounding community. The horse owners associations in LA wanted to be all in the same district. Well, this is going to sound snarky, but it's true. If they did that, they would have had to like create a concrete bridge that went over the LA River and stretched into the San Fernando Valley to have continuous. I mean, so I mean, people can get weird, but yeah, it partly means if you got a small community, if you got larger communities, we can't, like that's why you asked the question, which communities around you would you feel comfortable being with, and who would you not? Like, don't put us in Bakersfield again.
Okay.
Okay, anybody else have any more questions that you would like to ask? Raise your hands. Yes, Maddie, unmute yourself.
Thank you. I had myself unmuted, and then I just remuted myself. Yes, so it seems like we're talking about, especially like statewide for our congressional districts. We've got the commission to draw those lines. And so they have additional requirements, but you're saying that the lower down districts are frequently still done by the elected officials. And, and really the Brown, I guess it's the Brown Act is the thing that regulates them, which has limited things. It is part of what we want to do. It is to encourage more redistricting to be done by commissions or independent third parties. Is that one of our goals?
Yeah, I think that would be the ultimate goal. I guess the goal this time around is to focus public attention on whatever bad behavior might occur and document it. So that if there's a movement, like people are worked up and angry about what happened, then you can take the next step, which is to say, well, let's get together and talk about a local ordinance to go to an independent commission. But this time around, it's to focus as much attention as possible on what the process is now, and really encourage whoever it is to do the right thing. Don't assume that everybody's going to be a rotter. Some might, but if you can find allies on a school board or a council or whatever, people who elected officials who want to do the right thing, then they need backup. And so if they want to push for more public notice, more transparency, better practices, the fact that they have the league and 6 or 7 other groups writing letters and making public comment to show that the community as a whole wants to see this, it gives them more leverage. But yeah, I mean, ideally, you would get to the point where, it would be done by independent groups. Of course, the thought of that, hundreds of independent commissions, but whatever. I mean, it'd be better than what happens now. So it's participatory democracy at its greatest, at the grassroots.
Judy.
On a national level, Chris, are states tending toward redistricting like California has, or are we still an outlier?
Well, there's not that many, but it's growing. Michigan, for instance, the League in Michigan really spearheaded a group. They've got now an truly independent commission starting out. Colorado expanded theirs, and it now takes care of everything and is truly independent. There are a few other states that are pushing. Some are going for like advisory commissions, which are whatever. I mean, better than nothing. But at the end of the day, if you've got somebody else telling you, well, we don't like your maps, we're going to redo it, you're not independent. The league is advocating in every state for a better process. We're looking at state leagues have if there's something in their state constitution that they can use to get a law passed, and in their states where hell will freeze over this time. And so the goal is to do as much public outreach as possible to highlight the bad behavior and just educate people about what a rotten deal is happening and lay the groundwork for advocacy later. Because, this is an enormous amount of power, and nobody gives up power without a struggle. Now, the interesting thing is the House just passed H.R. 1, the For the People Act. It's going to go to the Senate. In that act is provision for independent redistricting commissions in all states. So it will be really interesting to see what the Senate does with it. But yeah, that's one of the parts of the bill is a move to independent redistricting for all states.
That would be awesome.
Yeah, at least for Congress. Now, they can't mandate what a state does with its own legislature. But at least for Congress, the law would be you've got to have an independent redistricting commission. And, if you got it through and got it started, then, you get the argument, well, if you can do it for Congress, why aren't you doing it for the state? See, we use that argument in reverse here in California. The state commission is the gold standard. And so when we speak to local commissions and incumbents, and they say, well, we want you to do this. Oh, we can't do that. Well, the state commission does it. Why can't you do it? Yes, you can. If they can do it, you can do it. Well, it wouldn't work. Well, yes, it did. It worked 10 years ago, and it's going to work again. And you don't have half the complexities that the state commission has. So you can give more than 3 days public notice. Now, you get pushed back on it, but that's one of the things we're doing, is to say, you're required to do 3 days notice, but do 5 days, do 7 days. The public has a right, it takes time for people to know that's going to happen and get their testimony together, that type of thing. Those are the things we're using. And whenever we get, well, that can't be done, it's, well, yeah, it can.
Anybody
Very
else?
tired of hearing about the state commission.
Well, no, Chris, we really appreciate you taking the time and doing this wonderful presentation with the slides and information that we can share with our membership and on our website, and come back to you when we have more questions.
Yeah.
And I will share the links when when it all gets settled, the dust gets settled, and they are reliable links. I will share
Okay.
with members.
So I'll be interested to find out what you guys decide you want to do when you decide to do whatever it is.
All right, that sounds
Okay.
This is
well.
really
Thank
good.
you very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Stop recording.